I'm Matt, and this is Matt Adulting. Today, we're back in the truck again. Got a little story for today. I don't even remember what reminded me of this one, but it's a fun little story. So in October of 2004, I had just gotten hired on for another job. I had been recovering from a wreck that had me injured, and I couldn't do the work that I had been doing. It took a while for me to find myself another job, and I took an engineering job that I was going to be driving from Marietta up to Cartersville every day. Was feeling pretty good because I finally had a new job. I was going to have some money coming in. I hadn't gotten to go see my family in a while because I didn't really have the money to pay for fuel and all that other stuff. When I got the new job, I went ahead and got on the road to go to Augusta to see my family for the weekend. New job was going to start Monday. So Friday night, I load up in the car and get myself ready to go. And I realized that the car was overdue for an oil change. So do the oil change on the car real quick, get the rest of my stuff in the car, and get on the road. Before I made it out of Marietta, my oil pressure light came on. It's odd. So, pull off, realized that when I had done the oil change, I'd made a mistake. And on the oil filter, on any of the ones where it's a screw-on filter, there's a little bitty O-ring, it's probably like that big on the particular oil filter that I was using, that stays on the oil filter and seals up against the engine block. Well, the old O-ring had stayed on the block. And I didn't realize that because I didn't check the oil filter when I took it off because I didn't ever think that that was a possibility. So when I put on the new oil filter, it had two O-rings or gaskets up against each other instead of one pinched between the two pieces of metal. And the pressure from the oil pump had blown out that seal, and it had been shooting oil while I was driving. So I had pulled the oil filter while figuring this whole thing out. I got the old O-ring off, put the oil filter back, walked down the road, bought some more oil, topped off the oil, got on the road, and headed for Augusta still. Got down into downtown Atlanta, and then I headed eastward, and I don't remember exactly where I was. I think I had already made it outside the perimeter. So at that point, I was a third of the way to Augusta. The engine started knocking really bad, and it got worse fast, and I realized that I had gotten some damage from oil starvation. When it had blown out and lost the oil, it probably had torn up the bearings, it had clogged some stuff up, and then after more driving, it started getting where it was blocking up the oil passages, starved parts of the engine for oil, and it started knocking. And pulled it off into a mall parking lot and started looking for a way to get home, and then started trying to figure out what I was going to do from there, because now I had a dead car and I had work Monday morning. So at this point, I did have a cell phone. Mobile data was a very expensive extra option, and anybody who is familiar with that time, it was one of those things where you didn't sign up for it extra either. It was if you hit the thing that would get you to the internet, it just started charging you. So it was an expensive thing. But in this case, it was an important thing. So I had gone on to one of the car forums that I was a member of and posted up a thing saying, hey, I'm stuck, I'm stranded, I can't afford a tow truck. I need somebody to try and help me get a car from whatever city I was in, whatever mile marker I was close to, back up to Marietta. And a whole bunch of guys started sending that information to other people, and suddenly I had some private messages coming in, and not too long later I had a guy show up with a truck and a trailer willing to, at no cost, haul my car back home for me. So I didn't even know this guy, and he was willing to do me the favor of getting that car home. Now, his name was Mr. Johnson, and that's going to be important in some videos that I talk about later, so keep that in mind. But Mr. Johnson was a good old boy, wore a cow print ball cap, chewed skull something, had a truck, had a trailer, and was willing to help me just because. And we loaded up that car, and he brought me and my girlfriend and the car all the way back up to Marietta and dropped it off. Now, sitting in my shop at the house was a car that I had just finished helping build for a friend of mine, where we had taken a 2.3 liter 4-cylinder Mustang, pulled out the engine, and put a V8 in it, and had done a whole bunch of other work. And that 2.3 liter 4-cylinder was sitting in the corner of my shop. And the car that I was driving was a 1974 Pinto wagon, which anybody that knows cars knows that the Pinto was the car that the 2.3 liter engine from Ford was designed for. Now, this engine out of the Mustang, it was a much newer version of the engine, and a whole lot of things weren't the same. That was a fuel injected engine. I had a carbureted engine. A lot of parts were different over the years, and so the only thing that we could think of to do, though, was to try and see if we could adapt one to work for the other. So my friend Will and a few other friends came over. No, Will was living there already. Will was my roommate at that point. But a few other friends came over. We put on a constant pot of coffee. We stoked up a fire in the wood stove that was in the shop, brought up the temperature, and got to work. And we stripped and pulled the engine out of the Pinto, and put it up on a bench, and we picked up the engine that was going to go into the Pinto and got it onto the engine stand and stripped them both down to where it was just the long block, which, if you don't know what that is, that's the bottom end of the engine, which is the big hunk of metal with all the turning components in it, and the top end, which is the head, but everything else was stripped off. And it was 1, 2 in the morning at that point, and we shut down for the night. Got up the next morning, stoked the coals that were in the wood stove, threw more wood in, and got the shop back up to temperature and got to work again. And we started comparing parts. What will fit from one engine onto the other? What can I keep that was on the newer engine that will still actually work on the old one? We ran into problems of there was a hole in the old engine that ran a mechanical fuel pump that when they went to fuel injection, they took that little block out of the casting, and so there was no hole there anymore. So I had no way to bolt my fuel pump up. Went and bought the cheapest fuel pump that I could, because again, remember, I had no money at all. Bought the cheapest electric fuel pump that I could, mounted it up on the firewall, hooked it up to ignition power, and also through the oil pressure sender, so that if I lost oil pressure, it would kill the fuel pump. I messed with the exhaust manifolds. None of the holes lined up. We had to drill and tap the block to be able to put a mount stud in a spot that there wasn't one. Just all of this work. And by Sunday mid-morning, we were firing up that engine in the Pinto, and did a little bit of a shakedown, see what we needed to tweak, what we needed to adjust from there. And Sunday afternoon, I was sitting down eating some food with my friends, thanking them for their help. And Monday, I went to work on time. The big takeaway and lesson from this is having friends that they're willing to just drop whatever they're doing and come help you when you've got a problem. Having community where you can call out for help, and the people in that community will vouch for you and send somebody that they know to come help you. Because I was stuck. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no way to take care of myself, and other people provided for me to be able to take care of it for me. Another big takeaway from this is, if you're poor, you better know how to work on your own stuff. Because if I had lost the engine in that car and I didn't know how to do any of that mechanical work, all I was going to be able to do was not show up for my new job, not have my new job, not be able to have a car, and I don't know how that would have worked out, because the only way to get a new engine in it would have been to pay somebody, and I had no money. So I would have been, at the best case scenario, in a debt trap where I put something against a credit card, or took out a loan or something, and owed a whole bunch of money that was on top of what I borrowed, just to be able to get the money to pay for getting the engine done, to be able to go to work so I could earn money to pay it back. And that is a horrible cycle to be in, where you're constantly having to borrow to be able to earn the money to be able to pay back what you owe. That is not a situation I ever want to be in. Work really hard to try not to be in that situation. The big takeaway on this still is, building your community around you, having people that you know that you can count on to help you, but also taking the time to learn a lot of skills to be able to take care of things for yourself. You never know when you're going to be stranded in a situation where all you can do is work hard to fix the problem, and nobody else can fix it for you. So, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.